Good afternoon, everyone. This is Mike O'Malley with the Hurricane Outlook and discussion for November 2nd, 2020, recorded around 3 p.m. Eastern Time. While taking a wide look across the tropical Atlantic this afternoon, we have, of course, Major Hurricane Eta, which is located a little whiles to the east of the Nicaragua coastline, and this is expected to be coming into the coastline tonight, but it's not going to be moving very fast. In fact, the storm has started to slow down and take a west southwest turn, and then eventually, over the next few days, move very slowly over the landmass here of Central America and then potentially pop back out over water in the Gulf of Honduras and the southwestern Caribbean. Now, if we take a closer invisible satellite loop here, we can see that Eta today has been surrounded with a nice low-level eye feature here. Very deep convective banding on all sides, basically a closed eye wall that recon found from very early this morning. We have another plane that is heading in now, which will be there in about approximately 3 hours or so. But you can really see that we've had this very deep convective banding today, and this has led to the appearance of a low level eye feature that has occurred. And we also have very abundant lightning near the eye wall structure here. Now, again, this is moving towards the west southwest, and again, is moving very slowly, although it's very close to the coastline. This is moving very slowly, and it's not going to be a fast moving storm at all. You can see it is barely moving right now, and is one of the reasons why we're going to be able to have at least one or two more recon planes in there, because this slow movement is not going to project this very far over the next day or two. But what this is going to do is dump a tremendous amount of flooding rainfall that, again, is already occurring across portions of Honduras and into Nicaragua, because of all this precipitation shield right here, this banding that's rotating around, even well far inland over Honduras and over the Gulf of Honduras. This is producing a lot of flash flooding and will be the primary threat once this moves inland. As this does so, of course, is going to weaken over the very high mountainous terrain, but the flash flooding concern could see as much as 35 inches of rain in isolated locations, and this is a very, very big deal. So I want to emphasize here that this might be a high end category 4 hurricane on approach to landfall, but after landfall, not only do you have storm surge to contend with along the coastline, obviously the wind threat, but well inland, you're going to have 20, 30 inches of rain, isolated amounts up to 35 inches, maybe even isolated amounts upwards of 40 inches of rain in some of those higher areas that are susceptible to runoff. Of course, you're going to have mudslides, flash flooding, just the whole 9 yards. This is a very serious and life threatening situation. And of course, you need to take this very seriously. You really do not have any more time left to finish your preparations along the coastline. If you're inland, but still within that, 30-mile region of the coastline, you still have a little while longer, especially towards the southwest here where some of these convective bands aren't as bad. But once this inner core and the central dense overcast is already starting to impact portions of the coastline, you are going to have a very rough night. And again, this is still intensifying all the way up until landfall, it seems, which is a very bad situation. Now, going forth with time, again, this is a Category 3 hurricane with sustained winds of 120 miles per hour moving westward at 9. This has started to take a west-southwest dive, and recon will confirm that later. Again, making landfall potentially by early tomorrow morning by 7 o'clock in the morning. So this is not moving much. And then even by Wednesday, this is over portions of Nicaragua, and this is still not moving much. Now, it has weakened down to a tropical storm, but even through this time, this is expected to remain a tropical depression all throughout its lifetime, and then back over the coastline here and then back over the Gulf of Honduras. This is very important because this has been a change in the forecast that we once thought that maybe this was going to come and dive into South America, not be of consequence. Now we're starting to see maybe that begin to change, where the models are forecasting this to reemerge over the Gulf of Honduras and into the Caribbean, where it has a more favorable environment to strengthen once again. Now, if we look at the GFS pattern here, this is the 500 millibar flow. And again, what we're looking at here is the 500 vorticity and also the geopotential height at 18,400 feet in the atmosphere. And what we can see right now, the main steering factors is we have a big ridge right now sitting over Texas and Mexico. And we also have a very big trough that's digging in that also has brought a cold front to Florida, bringing it some very relieved conditions. But you can see this trough digging in across portions of the northeast United States right now. And that axis, along with the trailing cold front, extends all the way into Florida. At the very same time, we have a ridge of high pressure that is building right now over Texas and Mexico. And you can see the kind of the arrows that I'm drawing in here. This represents the wind flow at this in this kind of representation. And all along here, you have a southwesterly trajectory in the mid levels. And again, this is in part because of this ridge that is expanding. And you'll start to see what happens here within 30 hours from now. This is by tomorrow, election day, on 18 Zulu time. So this is 1 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. We can see this big ridge, this centered here over portions of South Texas and into portions of northeastern Mexico. We can see this big high here, and this high extends all the way out into the Gulf of Mexico and periphery. And what this does, again, is forcing a storm in the mid levels, a stronger storm, which is what we've tended to see, is now going to dive towards the southwest and then over portions really of Central America. Now, the mid-level flow is one that is out of the southwest. The low-level steering flow at this time is out of the north. So what you're going to be having here is, of course, a strong storm that is initially diving towards the southwest, but then initially and then eventually you can kind of see that this ridge is still here, but in the low levels, your flow has now turned towards the north. And what we end up having is a larger gyre setup that ends up kind of appearing over the eastern Pacific and the far southern portions of Central America and the Gulf of Honduras within 72 hours from now. And again, this is an area of relatively lower pressure, and on the north side of this gyre, you might be looking for a spin up on the north side here. Now, this remains very questionable as to whether or not this is going to be the remnant circulation of Eta or an entirely new circulation that forms. Either way, there is increasing confidence that there's going to be something coming out into this region within the next 5 days or so. And the Euro model here, this is the European 12Z run. Again, much of the same idea for the next 72 hours. But then after that, after 72 hours from now, and by day 5, it starts to lift a storm more towards the north here. And again, this is much more consolidated than what we've seen on models such as the GFS, where this is a very loosely organized and there is no concentrated vorticity signature here by day 5. Now, we continue to move this forward, and this eventually deepens this into a rather formidable hurricane here in the Caribbean within past 5 days. Now, again, there's a lot of uncertainty that is going into this forecast here because, again, it's not necessarily confident that we are going to have a storm that reemerges here as the remnants of Eta. In fact, this could be an entirely new storm that forms on the north side of a gyre across the Gulf of Honduras and then goes somewhere within the general vicinity of the northwestern Caribbean. So it's not a guarantee that this is going to be the remnant circulation of Eta, but it is increasingly confident that we at least think the mid-level energy associated with Eta will kind of come back over water and be able to help regenerate a cyclone. Now, the low-level circulation is probably going to be disrupted in this very high mountainous terrain down here in Central America. There's very little chance that this low-level circulation will survive. And that really questions the overall evolution of days 4 and 5 here on the Hurricane Center forecast, because this could entirely be a new storm, but this could also be something worthwhile, that it is indeed the low level circulation remains intact still. So again, there remains a large discrepancy here, and there is some things that, of course, we just don't know at the moment in time. Now, if we look here at the HWRF forecast, this is the HWRF 500 millibar flow, and again, much of the same logic here applies. The storm stalls here near the coastline and dumps a tremendous amount of rainfall, even far inland, and then after that, it kind of pivots around. The low level circulation does start to die out, and you can see the HWRF is having a harder time actually depicting where that low level circulation is. And then eventually, if we go down to the low levels here at the 850 vorticity, we can see a new storm starting to form down here in the Caribbean. Now, again, whether or not this is the low level circulation or this could be a new circulation remains to be seen. We can see this very elliptical shape here of a larger gyre that is lifting out from in the Eastern Pacific and Central America and lifting in towards the Northwestern Caribbean. And at this time, we could see a storm form somewhere in this region or a storm regenerate from the leftover energy of Eta. So it's entirely possible that we do get a storm somewhere in the Central Caribbean or Northwestern Caribbean within the next 5 days or so. And the Hurricane Center right now is starting to go with that idea. It seems likely that something is going to be there within the next 5 or so days. Now, if we look here at the steering flow, or not the steering flow, but the upper level wind pattern here, this is the 200 millibar wind, and this is the 12Z HWR front. So we're going to kind of skip through what happens here. But again, anticyclonic flow allows us to intensify all the way up until landfall and will likely be a very strong storm in this environment at that time. Again, a very strong storm more than likely is going to be resolved here. Then as it does so, again, this energy is going to try to move back over water, something like that. Now, again, as it does so here, you can see that the model kind of jives around a little bit. It's not sure where to depict a low, but eventually there is a new low that forms here. Now, the challenging part of this forecast is what's going to be happening beyond the next 5 days. As we can see here in the upper level flow here, we have a largely symbolic trough that's digging in here, and this is causing vertical wind shear in the northwestern part of the Caribbean. And without a storm to generate much upper level outflow, this could be a problem in terms of experiencing a pretty significant feat with that wind flow. And this does make it seem like any storm could at least potentially be strung out for a little bit here. And if we actually look at the 700 to 400 millibar relative humidity, we can see that indeed is happening. We get a storm to form here on the southern part, but there's a lot of dry air that is kind of lurking around. And again, this dry air with any circulation is going to try to get wrapped in behind it. So again, any storm that does form in here is going to have to work within some contention with this dry air and vertical wind shear. Now, again, this is 5 days out, so this is not an incredibly accurate representation of what will be happening here, but you can very clearly see this moisture axis is very elongated from basically from southwest to northeast. It's very elongated. And that brings a plume of moisture all the way up into the southwestern Atlantic and crossing over the Bahamas and Florida at about the day 5 mark. So again, there's a lot of uncertainty here in terms of what might actually happen. So it's very important to understand that there's not a lot that we completely know in terms of what's going to happen beyond 5 days, as it remains relatively hard to depict. Now, if we do look at this here, this is the upper ocean heat content valid as of yesterday. And again, these red and white colors here, this is the higher upper ocean heat content. And again, you can very clearly see that our storm right now is in a relatively favorable environment with very high upper ocean heat content all the way up until landfall. Now, after this moves inland here and then potentially re-emerges, this has yet again another very high upper ocean heat content environment to work with. And those sea surface temperatures, if we quickly look here, those sea surface temperatures would be still at about 28 to 29 degrees Celsius. So very warm, very supportive. And you can see this whole entire environment is still very conductive and conducive for additional development. So a lot is going to hinge on whether or not the low level center, the low level vorticity, and mid level energy can survive and make that journey across back over into the Caribbean, or is it a potential new circulation at that time? All right. With that being said, hope you all have a great rest of your afternoon, evening. Of course, I am Michael O'Malley. I'll talk to you guys again some more later tonight or tomorrow morning.